Good evening. I'm Alicia. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank Dick for asking me to speak. I've come out here a couple of times and share my story, and I tell you what, this round of sobriety, this is the only place I'll tell my story anymore, because you guys have won my hearts. This is where the hurting really takes place, and to see the miracles that God's doing in your life here makes this a special place for me, and so it's an honor to get to come here again. I say this every time I speak, and I wish I had an exciting way that I could start my story, but really there's nothing. I'm from San Antonio, and went to private school here for 10 years and was the sweet little private school girl for a little bit. And my dad was a assistant pastor and a worship leader at all these churches we went to, and so from the outside we looked like this good Christian home. And yet what was really going on the backside was that Dad's cheating on Mom, Mom's fighting, she's got 5 kids, we have no money, there's tons of yelling and screaming, but then we'd walk in the church doors on Sunday and say, "Praise the Lord, bless God, it's good to see you," and everyone would smile and look at our little family coming in all well-groomed, and they'd think, God, what a great Christian family. And what I learned from that is how to put on the front outside that everything's okay. And it turned out to be a very painful lesson that I learned throughout my life, that you can't fake that you're okay when you're dying inside. But from an early age, I remember doing that. And I was talking to one of the girls the other day, and we were talking about the different masks that we wear, and so I'd wear that mask when I was at church, the sweet Christian girl. And then as I'm getting older, put on a different mask. And over the years, the masks got scarier and scarier. But the different personalities that would come out through this disease. But I never really knew who I was because I'm always wearing that mask, So my junior year, I transferred to public school, and I gravitated to the party crowd immediately because I had started drinking, at 14. And immediately when I drank, I felt better. The anxiety, the fear, the insecurities, all these things that I had just went away. And that's the trick about this disease. Alcohol works. The dope works to numb out the stuff that's hurting inside. And hopefully you're starting to really get it, that this is where the real problem is. This is where we need the healing. The alcohol and drugs is just what we use to numb out what the real problem is. So at 14, when I found it, I knew I was done. And by 17, I transferred to public school and start hanging out with the party crowd, start dating the head of the party crowd, so I was very cool, at least in my own head. And the end of my junior year, that boy broke up with me, and I was devastated, because it was high school love. We were supposed to last forever. I had written his name on all my folders, so I thought that meant something. And so he breaks up with me, and I set out to do what we do. It was like, dude, I'm getting lit. I did not want to feel any of that. And so I succeeded, because we're usually good at doing that. And I went out that night. I remember getting dressed and what I was wearing, and that's the last thing I remember. I wake up, and I am in at BAMSI in the emergency room there, and I've got my jaws wired shut, my arms tied down, staples all the way down my stomach, a feeding tube, both legs in a cast, and I have no clue what happened. What I'm told happened is that I was very intoxicated, and my friends brought me home because they couldn't handle me, and my mom and I got in a fight, and I said, I just want to die, and I grabbed my keys, and she lives like Harry Worsbach and Rittiman over there, so right there by Oakwell Farms, I hit a telephone pole going 45 miles an hour. And I actually had this dude one time say, "Well, that's not very fast." I was like, really? I just told you I almost died? It was fast enough to do some damage. What I did is I bit the steering wheel. So I broke the palate of my mouth, knocked out 4 teeth, shattered my nose bone from the inside, bit off my bottom lip, ripped my cheek, broke my TMJ, lacerated spleen and liver, broke a bunch of ribs. My Achilles tendon in the left leg got stuck in the thing that moves your seat back and forth, that bar underneath. And in the right, the dashboard dropped, and I broke the tibia and fibula, and then dislocated my ankle to where it was turning in, touching the other one. So it was a bad day. You know, and I remember coming to, and there's my family just staring at me, and I can't talk because my jaws are wired shut, and I've got the trach in my neck, and I have no clue what happened, you know. And I stayed in the hospital the whole summer before my senior year, learning to walk again, and all that fun stuff. And I remember the first time they showed me my face, because this is what took the brunt, and I hadn't had my nose redone yet, so at the time there was no cartilage or bone in the nose, so it was like this big and flipped up. My face was the size of a pumpkin. They had tried to take the inside of my lip that I had left and sew it back together, or they folded my lip down like this, what I had left, and then did sewing there, and it came back over the years, but at the time it was just a very thin line. And I remember wanting to die. Because see, I had, you know, athletics and external stuff, it has been what I had relied on to get me through life. You know, I was so ugly inside that I'd relied on my external, my looks or whatever to get me through. And so when I saw what had happened, I didn't want to live anymore. And I remember when I got home from the hospital, all these people who had said they were going to come visit, and all these cheerleaders that I wasn't even friends with were like, OMG, we're going to, I don't think they said OMG way back then, but they were going to come see me, they were going to be my best friend. No one showed up when I got home 3 months later, and that was the first time I really tried to end it, and took a bunch of the pain pills that I had just because I didn't want to be alive if that's how it was going to be. And make it back to school my senior year, and you know how nice high schoolers can be. The rumor going around school was that I had slept with so many guys that night that I was exhausted and I hit a telephone pole. I was like, dude, I want to be a slut or an alcoholic. It was a tough call, but it was like really, and everyone making fun of me, you know, for my face and how it looked and all this, and it left some deep wounds, you know. Kids can be mean. And graduated somehow at the top of the first quarter of my class. I went to MacArthur, and didn't know what I was going to do for college, so I thought it'd be a good idea to take the SAT on LSD and watch the dots go around, and I scored high enough to get into Southwest Texas, or Texas State. I obviously wasn't very high. And I had met my people, man. I get there and these guys drink like I do. It's like, finally, I won't stick out anymore, you know? And I took it a step further, and I decided to join a sorority, which was hilarious because here I am, a poor white trash tomboy. I got no business being in a sorority, but oh my God, let's put the mask on, you know. And so I live in this home with all these women. There are these girls. They're all rich, you know. It was horrible, and I'm dying in here, but I'm gonna put the front on like this is all good, you know. 2 years, you know, in college, I'm doing well in that sense, in the school sense. However, my drinking is just escalating, and I had been in a very unhealthy relationship, lots of cheating on me, lots of abuse, lots of stupid stuff, and it was going so horrible that I decided to drop out of college and follow him to Texas Tech because he loved me. And so because I was so dead inside and I'm trying to use him for my happiness, I follow him up to Texas Tech, and I didn't realize, I had never been to Lubbock before. And so as I see this flat, icy, you know, plain that I'm living on, I only lasted about a month and then had to come back home. But when I get home, again, because I'm so healthy, I meet my first ex-husband. Now, got to keep track here with me, ready? Okay, so first ex-husband, let's set him up. He was just getting out of the penitentiary. 5 years straight, alcohol and drug charges. I knew he abused women because I had known some girls he had dated before. He was very physically abusive. He had no job, no car, no money, and he was all mine. And I bet some of these ladies over here would have fought me for him because that's what we do. And I really thought that this was love, and I had started to do cocaine a little bit at that time, and it was a cool deal because he was a drug dealer. What a bonus, right? And so you know, I had done a little cocaine before he came along, and the same thing happened to me with cocaine that happened with alcohol. When I put that stuff in my system, it was like this monster would come out. I didn't, you know, we'd get a little amount between 4 people just to play cards and stay up on a work night. It's time for them to go to bed. They're going to bed. I am licking CD covers, chewing on baggies, just doing all this. I mean, something different happened with me. And I didn't understand what it was, but you guys do, yes? Yes. So, he turns me on to crack cocaine. And I call the stuff devil poop, because that's exactly what it was. That stuff stole my soul. And it was about 5 years that let me back up. By the time we're together, he got sent back to the penitentiary, and go figure, right? And before he gets moved over, he's in Bexar County Jail. Well, the physical abuse with him started at 6 months. The addiction's getting horrible, demoralizing, it's awful. So I think it's a great idea that while he's waiting in Bexar County to get sent off to Beeville or wherever he was going, I should marry him. So, me and my sane thinking poses as a missionary intern, goes up to the 2nd floor of Bexar County Jail. He was in his orange suit. It was so cute. And we had like a little 30-second ceremony. He was like, do you, okay, you're now Mrs. Satan. You know, it's like that wasn't really his last name, but that'd be weird, wouldn't it? And it was insane. And I come home with my marriage certificate, and I could not figure out why my family was not happy. It was like, what? You know, and that was just a nightmare decision that I made. But I truly believed, because I was so sick in here and had no God in here, that this man, if I marry this man, if I do this, if I do all that, then I'll be okay. It doesn't work. And needless to say, at the end of 5 years, he'd almost killed me 3 times. I had no material possessions left anymore. We'd given it all away for dope. My soul was gone. And I went to treatment for the first time in '98. I ran away to the hill country to get sober. While I'm in treatment, I went ahead and sent him divorce papers because we didn't have anything to split. It was easy. And so get that done. I go to treatment, and I jump in there and I play the treatment center game. I immediately become secretary of the community. I take notes in the doctor's meeting. I'm voted most likely to stay sober because I'm good. I know how to say the right thing when I'm dead in here. So I wasted 30 days, and I moved to the hill country because San Antonio's the problem. And within about 2 months, I had done nothing with God. I had just been dry. And as you know, without God, you can't stay sober. And so, yeah, I didn't use for 2 months, but I was miserable. And I remember looking in the mirror and saying, all right, girl, we can drink, just don't do dope. Any of y'all heard that one? Yeah, it's a lie. And I'm looking in the mirror at what alcohol did at 17, and yet that doesn't even cross my mind, you know? And so I drank that night and did coke that night, and that began a year-long relapse. And during that year-long relapse, I met husband number 2. Yeah. So, this is not as scary, but it's getting better. So, husband number 2 was just a crackhead in the hill country that was living in a men's halfway house, and it paid off because those were the only meetings I would go to, was the men's halfway house meetings. And I didn't know that I'd hooked up with the chronic relapser of the hill country. He'd been to 20-something treatment centers by that time in his life. I just thought he was cute, and we ended up relapsing together or using together. And for 6 months, just another level of darkness, you know. And in 99, I finally walked into, it was January of 99, finally walked into Cocaine Anonymous, and, you know, had a trash bag full of clothes pretty much left. And I walk in a room, and they're talking about not only staying sober, but these women are sharing about being where I'd been, and the shame and the guilt that they had carried around, and how they were free now. And it's the first, even though I come from a church background, I know about God, I know about all this stuff, but it was like the way, because they were saying they'd been where I'd been, that's what made the difference for me. And I jumped in, man. I started, you know, working the steps, started to get free. He relapsed when I had about 2 months sober, and that just began this nightmare of staying with him while he was using and a bunch of craziness. But at about about a year and a half sober, I found out I was pregnant. And Shane, or my ex-husband, was in treatment. And I didn't know how we were going to do this. You know, we weren't married or anything at the time, but I'm living in a garage apartment that was about this big, and I didn't have insurance. I'd just been let go from my job. But all I've ever wanted to be was a mama. That's it. And so I knew somehow, some way, God was going to do this. And so another insane decision. I decided to marry this man because I'm sure that'll help him stay sober. Having the pressure of being a husband and a father will probably help. And so we have a quick little ceremony while I'm 8 months pregnant in a gray maternity gown. It was very great wedding pictures. So that began just this nightmare of him relapsing. And then when it came time for my son to be born, you know, he went home. My ex-husband went home that night to go. I'd been in the hospital overnight. Let me back up, to induce labor. And so he went home to go take a shower. And some of y'all know he was missing for 3 days after that, you know. And so I can't find him. We don't know where he is. And they see I have to have an emergency C-section. And no one knows how to get a hold of him. And it's like, here is this huge day. And what are we going to do? And we finally found him, and he showed up. And he got there just in time as they were wheeling me back. But as that baby was laid in my arms, I knew it was just going to be he and I. I knew that. And I had felt a love through this little boy that I have never felt in my life. And I knew that we were going to be okay. So fast forward a couple of years, he doesn't stay sober, in and out of treatment centers, and when he was about 3, Ethan was about 3, I divorced him. And that was a hard thing to do because I had just bought my first home, and so now I'm going to be a single mom with a mortgage. I've started to work at this treatment center in the Hill Country, and I'm starting to help people. God begins to take my little story all around the world. I get to go to Denmark, Iceland, London, Canada, all around the United States. And I'm just blown away with what God's doing for me. And yet what happens is I start to get sicker and sicker. I don't know if any of y'all have ever had time sober, but you know that relapse didn't just happen. It happens way before we pick that up. And what started happening with me was that my ego and my pride and my arrogance started to get pretty big. I'd have little sneaky dishonesties that would come in. I started to feel like I was Miss AA. And that I had healing hands, and people needed to come to me for what the truth was, and it was sick. Now, no one could have told me this, because I didn't even see it happening, but it was happening. And as the years go by, you know, about 8 years sober, I'm not helping people anymore, because I'm working at the treatment center. That's all I got to do. So I quit sponsoring women. I just become a different person. And at the time, my right ankle, the one that had been dislocated, was causing me a lot of pain. The arthritis was really bad in the subtalar joint that enables you to walk on uneven surfaces. And so the doctor prescribed Darvocet. Now, yeah, so it starts with Darvocet, and I'm thinking, well, I told my sponsor, I still had a sponsor, but just had a sponsor in name, you know what I mean? I would never calling her, or what could she tell me? I already knew everything. You know, I could quote the big book, so why do I need a sponsor? And again, nothing about God. I'm missing the whole point there. So I start with Darvocet, and then I notice if I read the bottle a little differently, instead of taking 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 hours, if you take 4 to 6 every 1 to 2 hours, that's something. And so that's how that began. Now, mind you, I'm still working at the treatment center. I'm still helping people, these poor addicts and alcoholics out there. I'm different, you know. So I start this pain pill nightmare, end up getting 2 or 3 doctors going at the same time. It was a mess. And by the time I hit 10 years sober, I had sold, well, at about 8 years sober, I sold the first house, bought a bigger home. So check me out. Look what I've done. Notice the ego there. And at about 10 years sober, I decided to try the drinking experiment again. And I remember that first drink that I took, actually freaking out that I was going to have to change my sobriety date now. You see how sick that is? I just had 2 years of a lot of pain pill addiction, and I didn't think that was a problem. It was the alcohol that was going to be the problem. But I was sure I was going to do okay. And within 1 month, after 10 years of no alcohol, within 1 month, I was having to take shots in the morning just to get the shakes down. The book talks about it over and over again. Within a short time, we are worse off than ever. And oh my gosh, that was my experience. Another month goes by. It's Halloween night, 2009. And I remember getting my son ready for Halloween, and we're dressing up. And my sister, we were going to her house for trick-or-treating, and she had said there won't be any alcohol here, because I had convinced my family I was doing fine with drinking and not to worry. And so I'm drinking a whole lot before, and the next thing I remember, I come to in the middle of the street. There's kids lining the street, and there's a cop knocking on my window. I've hit a truck, a huge truck, and I had a small Honda Civic, and my son is screaming in the back seat, "Mom, I told you to quit swerving," and just screaming it over and over again. You know, if you go back to memories that you have like that, you go from the memory where he's laid in my arms and I know we're going to be together forever and all this, and then to see how this disease, how the enemy, the dark side, whatever you want to call it, comes in and just annihilates what God has done in your life. And that is what happened to me. I was on the front page of the Kerrville Daily Times. I was still working at the treatment center at the time I got the DWI, so then I lose my job, I lose my home, got a felony DWI, and a week after I got out of jail, I get a call from CPS. And I really was delusional to think that it was going to be fine. You get a new job and move on. And yet CPS says that I'm being charged with child endangerment. And wait a minute, that's not me. You know, I love this kid. What are you talking about? You know, and so they said, you need to go to treatment. And they take my son, and I go to treatment, and I do 30 days again, standing on my head. Nothing changed in here, nothing. And I come home from treatment, I'm going to be sober, sure, whatever, just give me my kid back. I jump through CPS's hoops, you know, and they give him back to me after about 2 months. So he's home with me for just a month, and my ex-husband calls on me that I'm drinking again. So CPS says, sign him over again. I was just, no. I just drank one night, you know, come on, give me, and that was a lie. But I didn't believe they were really going to do it. And as they're taking Ethan for the second time, and he's saying, Mama, don't you love me? They say, if you quit drinking, I can stay with you. You must not love me. What do you do to that, you know? If you're like me, and you've got all that pain inside, you know exactly what you do. You numb it out. You know, and so the drinking continued. And we moved down here to San Antonio, worked with CPS down here, and I got my son back while I was still drinking, lying to CPS. And that poor child had to witness some horrible scenes. And thank goodness I had the breathalyzer in my car, so I couldn't drive drunk anymore. But I would, you know, the insanity of waiting for the breathalyzer to go off, in between, you know, blowing in it real quick and then chugging wine and then trying to race home before the breathalyzer would go off again. I mean, it was crazy. I violated on that thing so many times when I would try to start the car in the morning from drinking so much the night before. And of course, as you know, that goes to your probation officer, and I'm not supposed to be drinking. And so it was a matter of time, you know, before they gave me a motion to revoke. And at the end, I'm, you know, hiding in my closet chugging cheap wine. And my poor son is screaming outside the door, Mama, please don't be drinking. And I hated myself. So something changed, though. Something had to give. And so by the grace of God, I called someone for help and said, I need to get to a treatment center. I'm ready. And the place that they sent me was a women's trauma center. I told you how sick I was. They knew I needed to go deep this time or it wasn't going to work. And I tell you what, there was something that happened there, not right off the bat. But I knew that if God and I didn't get hooked up for good and for real this time, there was no way. I didn't know how I was going to have a new experience, though, either, because I had the book memorized. So how is the 12 steps going to work this time? How is this, when I can quote this, How is it going to be new and fresh to me? And so I cried out to God, just telling him, I'll do whatever I got to do. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And there was a lot that I had to give up to get sober this time. When I went to treatment, I thought I was going away for 30 days. I get there and find out it's a 90-day treatment center. And they said, my job had said, if you're home after 30 days, you can keep your job. If not, you lose it. And so I made the decision to stay in treatment, so I lost my job. That meant I had no more health insurance. Okay, then take me off all the antidepressants I'm on. I'm done. I knew my car was going to get repossessed. If I broke up, I was in another, go figure, extremely sick relationship because I was so sick. And he was going to pay for my car while I was in treatment, and yet I knew that was sick. So I hung up the phone on him to never speak to him again because I knew if I stayed in that relationship, I was going to get loaded. So my car got repossessed. There was threat of eviction, but I didn't care. I knew that God and I were going to do this. I knew that something was going to change. And as I began to walk through this process again and go through the steps again, guess what? Every NA, AA, CA, whatever program you're in, it is all about God. Every bit of it. And I know you're shaking your head, but I'm serious. It's like, do you really get that? I mean, it talks about the spiritual principles. It talks about the stuff in here. But when it really clicks that our relationship with God is the only thing that's going to keep us sober, then it starts to make a little more sense. Yes, I've got to stay sober one day at a time, but the only way I can do that is with God's help. If these things inside me don't get healed and changed, that's not going to happen. And so as I started to go through this process again, all these things I had memorized before finally came to life for me. They weren't just words anymore, it was real. And by the time I left treatment 90 days later, I was not the same person. I didn't look the same, I didn't sound the same. Every time I spoke anywhere, just to any girls or in a meeting or whatever, I would cry because I was so filled with God's love. I finally got it. What God did for me and how much he loves me. And I know we talk about God kind of in a God as you understand him way, and I'll just tell you right now, I am a Christian, and Jesus is the one that saved my life. And I know what he did for me on the cross. I get it now, that he sent his son for the drunk woman that was going to almost kill her little boy. I get that. He loved me the same the day I was born, precious and innocent, as I was drunk and crazy. That's the reason he came. And when it finally went from here to here and started to make sense to me, I forgave myself, which I couldn't do that. All I used to hear was what a bad mother I am and what a horrible mother. Who does this to their kid? Blah, blah, blah. And all the voices that you hear in the head, which are lies from the enemy. It's stuff that's trying to be used to take you out again and again. When I began to listen to the truth about what God said about me, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, that he loves me no matter what, that he sent his son just for me. When I started to get that, I would cry every time I spoke because I was so filled. I just wanted to love God and love his kids. I didn't know where it was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen. And I left treatment and I came home to no job, no car, about to be evicted. My poor son was scared to be around me because he didn't trust me. Every time I would say, I'm going to go to the store, I'll be right back, he would start crying because of what he'd experienced. You know, he'd be, downstairs in the parking lot playing with his friends. And he'd look up on the balcony and go, Mama, are you drunk? I'd be like, no, thanks for asking. But that's what I put him through, How would he know? He had to start seeing in me what was changing and start to trust me again. When I got home a couple weeks later, I get a call from my probation officer saying that they had to put a warrant out for my arrest while I was in California. And they issued an MTR, and so I needed to come turn myself into Kerr County Jail real quick and just turn yourself in on a Wednesday, you'll be out by Friday. And that way we can get it off, get the warrant done. And so here I just got home, and now I have to look in my precious little boy's eyes and say, okay, now Mommy's going to jail, and try to explain to him that I'm being serious. I didn't do anything wrong this time. Well, I did, but that was last time. And so I leave all encouraged that I'm going to Kerr County Jail for 2 nights, and I've never been in jail except for the DWI night. And so I drive myself to the jail. I park in the front row at the jail because I'm getting in, getting out. And that's not what happened. I didn't make it on the docket like they hoped I would. And so I'm in there and I'm crying constantly just because I'm scared, I'm freaked out. And these girls in there that are going back to TDC for their 4th time, just tough chicks telling me to suck it up and just do my time. And I'm like, but you don't understand, you know? I'm trying to look cool by doing push-ups and dips on the metal. That's what they do in the movies. I'm watching Lifetime movies over and over again, you know? I mean, I guess y'all have been there. Yeah, I guess so. It was horrible. But here's what happened, though. I would go out to play handball by myself anytime they'd give me the chance. And God met me on that court. Let me tell you, I'm there crying, singing this 3rd day praise and worship song. You're my great deliverer, my strong defender, and hitting that ball and going, God, I don't get this. I don't understand this, but I trust you. I don't like this. I'm scared, but I trust you, you know? Hitting my knees out there, just scared to death. But I trusted him. First time ever, guys, to really trust him. It's easy, as you know, to trust him when things are going well. Everything's going great. It is when things fall apart that our faith gets tested. And every time before when my faith would get tested, I would fail. Because it wasn't real. It wasn't connected to God's love for real. It was connected to words, but this time there was an experience around it. And as I walked through those 2 long weeks, I came out a different person. I went to court, and they were going to give me 6 months real jail time for all the violations I had on my blower, but instead they gave me 2 weeks time served. So off probation, everything was done just like that because of that time. So if you flash back with me to the handball court, he knew at that moment that that was going to happen, and just saying, my little girl, just hang on. Trust me here. I got the plan. So many of y'all right now are going through those same kind of things. You don't understand it. You don't like it. It's scary, but you've got to trust him. That's the only hope we got. If you trust him in this time, then when you get on the other side and you're able to look back, you're going to know that he did it. There's no denying his power at that point. He's showing up real. And as I got home from jail, I knew something was about to happen, that I had to go through that for a reason. And I get into my car and I check my phone, and there's a message from Brad Duforn, who's the founder of Pay It Forward Ministries. Like literally, got in the car and got the message. Now, Brad went to treatment at La Hacienda when I worked there in the Hill Country when I was sober, really sober, not faking sober, not like that kind of sober, but really sober. And apparently God had used me to help his life or whatever back then, and he'd stay sober. Haven't talked to him in 7 years, and randomly I get a message saying, Alicia, I've started a small nonprofit down here at Haven for Hope. I think you have some raw talent that God can use down here. I know you're not that long sober, but we want you down here. Again, I had no clue that this was the plan. When I got out of treatment, I was ready to go work at the front desk somewhere of some hotel or something and just love his kids that came in to rent a room, you know. I didn't know what he had planned, but God knew. And so I start to come down here to Haven for Hope, and I start to see the faces out here. And that's when I fell in love, you know. The story behind so many of your eyes, it breaks my heart. You are survivors. There's so many normal people that could not hang with what you've been through. You are tough. You don't give up. And the fact that you're in treatment right now says that you're still fighting. You're still not going to let the enemy win this battle. And I'm so proud of you for that. And as I started to get to know you guys one-on-one, I get to go over to the women's dorm on Wednesdays and just hang out with these crazy women. And I love them. It's my favorite part of my whole week is to go sit with them. And oh my gosh, we talk about some wacky stuff. But somehow the Holy Spirit brings it back around to him. You know, I'm not. Don't any of y'all. So anyway, and then the Next Right Step side, I get to be involved in y'all's life. When you get out of IHRP and you come into the Next Right Step dorm, Felipe and so many others, I get to watch you grow and to see the smile. I love hearing you talk, Felipe. I love it when you just share, because there's no filter. It is just flowing. That's a good, I don't mean that bad. It's flowing from the Holy Spirit, Felipe. It's just coming out. That is beautiful. So many of y'all. And it's such a gift to be a part of all of this. You know, Again, I didn't know what God's plan was. I didn't know at 17 years old when I got in this drunk driving car wreck that was going to be part of my story so many years later. But each one of these things I've been through, all of the things that have left scars and left wounds, God uses every single bit of it. So many of the things that I've been through, I get to use to try to help the women over there, and then they get to try to use theirs to help the next woman, and that's how it goes. You know, my son has obviously been through a lot because of what I did. He still has PTSD in cars. Like if a car will put on their brakes real quick in front of us, he screams and grabs the handlebar or the sidebar or whatever. That's not about that car in front of us. That's because he's the event that I put him through. I can look at that today and see that and try to help him instead of being like, why are you being all dramatic? You know, I know why. I did it. But that's okay. There's no shame and guilt attached because I'm forgiven. Last year, he started 6th grade. And there was a lot of fears about him getting into that, you know. And at the end of 6th grade, I started to notice some strange behavior and some stories that weren't lining up and some things that weren't making sense. And as an addict, you know, you start to go, he's lying, you know. And about 4 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, the Holy Spirit woke me up and told me to go get his phone. And I go get his phone and I look at text messages, and there's some things just, you can tell things have been erased. So I go to church that Sunday and I pray for him and for us, and I come back and I sit down with them and I said, okay, sit down, we're going to talk. God loves you enough to wake me up to try to help you fight whatever it is that's going on, because something's going on. Because look at this, he's got a crack addict for a daddy and he's got me for a mama. This kid's lined up for this generational curse to be passed right on down. And I knew it was something. And it took him 2 hours to finally tell me that at 11 years old, he had been experimenting with pot. Now, some of y'all, you're like, I was 9, lightweight, you know, but to me, it was just, oh my gosh. But the beautiful thing was, as he fell on me crying, as the little baby that he really still is, just broken, I was able to love on him, not do shame and guilt like what happened to me growing up. You're a bad little girl, you're going to hell. That's what I got, you know. I wasn't about to do that to my son. I showed him how much God loved him and how beautiful this was that he got honest with me. I showed him what the power of God can do. Telling him, Ethan, wait, you remember the drunk, crazy woman who would live in her closet. Look what God can do. Let's do this. And we started praying, and we did a whole lot of stuff together. And about a month later, when he's already on, you know, lockdown, not allowed to leave the house, you know, restriction, I get a call from school that some kid brought pills to school, and Ethan was a part of the group that took them. Now, the kid told him that these were melatonin, and if you weren't tired, they'd make you feel high, and ibuprofen, painkillers. He called them painkillers. Ha ha, idiot. But called them painkillers, and said if you take these and you don't have pain, you'll feel high. Thank God it wasn't something that my son could have died from, because we know that's going on around these schools these days. But the scary thing was my son wanted to change how he felt. That's the main reason he did it. And here's my biggest nightmare since that kid was little, that one day he's going to struggle with this addiction. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make that not happen. Because if we drink and do dope to numb out all the pain in here, how about I get him to the real solution right now? I get Jesus in there to do the healing that he needs for the pain his little heart has. And then he never picks up alcohol and dope again, therefore never having to go through this nightmare that you and I have lived. How about that for a different place? I think so. And here's the thing. I know God's got that little boy. I know he's got his own path and his own plan, but I'm not just going to stand by and let the enemy just take my kid. That's not going to happen. And I'm going to stay sober and do everything I got to do so he can watch what God does. And as the healing and restoration begins to take place with my son and I, he starts to get to know God even better because he's watching it through me. You all that are parents out there, there is nothing more powerful that we can do for our children than to stand in the name of God and get free and let them watch what God is doing in your life. Then they see that, they don't want to use. Then guess what? Their kids don't. And you change generations. This is so big, what you're doing here. This isn't just for you and so you feel better and you don't have to drink or do dope anymore. This is a generational curse that the enemy's trying to take us out with, and our kids. We got to stop it. And the only hope we have is in Jesus. So as you fight for your life here, know that you're affecting ripple effect, family members and friends, and your mom's finally sleeping at night. That means she's happier. That means your dad's happier. That means the dog's happy because he's finally not getting kicked anymore. That means, there's all kinds of things happening because you're sober. As you know, from what I've told you, I have a tendency in my life to be very sick and unhealthy. So therefore, I attract the sick and unhealthy. And don't have the best track record in my life because I've always been looking for something external to change how I feel, whether it be a man or drugs or alcohol or whatever. And so I told you I got out of that relationship when I was in treatment because I knew if I came home and stayed with him, I was going to get loaded. And I made a commitment to God that I was going to stay single for as long as he needed me to, because I was not willing to do this again. And so I began this journey with the Lord. And, there were a lot of Friday night red box with Jesus, that would be like, what are we going to watch tonight, Lord? And it got a little lonely. I got into reading. I was doing a lot at church. And God began to, I don't know how it changed. Like I said earlier, I fell in love with Jesus Christ. I got what that meant this time. And the need and the want and the loneliness, all these things that I had struggled with my whole life were gone. And as that continued, my relationship with him got stronger. And I could be there for the people I needed to help and for my son. And I was focused. And everything changed for me because that's been the one area of my life I've never been able to give God. And so as I went along this whole process, 18 months goes by and I'm like, all right, Lord, if the way I'm going to serve you is to be single, then I will do that. But I tell you what, you're going to have to remove this desire of my heart then. Because I would like one day, to meet the right person. And as I say that to God, I'm still looking around the room, seeing if he's bringing the right person right now, because I'm still crazy. And so I decided just to totally let it go. And about a week later, God brings an incredible man into my life that I was not looking for in that sense. It was someone 150 miles away that I couldn't have even dreamed up or put together on paper if I wanted to write down what the perfect man would look like. And not only was he a Christian who loved the Lord, but he's a 23-year Army veteran who had sacrificed a lot for our country, and there's so much honor and respect for what he had done with his life. And as we finally start to meet and talk, I started to feel, and as strange as that was, to feel the love of God from this relationship and from this person. It was almost like being in love, starting to fall in love with this person. It was like God saying, this is how special you are to me, that I'm going to bring this person into your life. And being with him was drawing me closer to God and talking about the Lord and praying together. And he's normal. Well, not really normal, but as far as alcohol and drugs are concerned. But he's a goofball that I've never laughed so hard in my life. There's all these different things that as a little girl you start to go, okay, I want this, 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 and this, and then you dress up and then it never happens. And guess what? God brought him. And today, the only problem we've got, he lives in Harker Heights. He's up at Fort Hood, and so it's kind of far away. And so we've had quite an interesting experience with the long distance thing. But that is both of us have drawn closer to God because of that, because our strength in God and being patient and waiting on the Lord is when the time is right, it's going to happen that he moves down here. And it's been a beautiful thing, just learning what healthy is supposed to look like and what real love is supposed to feel like. And it only was possible because of what I had let God do in here. And because of that, this man was my gift. And so today, as we went to lunch in the Riverwalk area, he wanted to find a nice place to sit down that was quiet, and I didn't quite understand why. And he begins to tell me how much he loves me, and just like, yes, I know. And he's like, I'm not finished. And it was just, what? And as he stood me up and then got down on one knee, you, Rich Scott. I'm excited to be your wife. Anyway, the cool thing is he had heard my story a little bit. I'd given him one of the CDs just so he would know, I didn't want to scare him too bad, like later on go, oh, by the way, I smoke crack. Oh, by the way, and so he'd already heard my story, and instead I had no fear of what he was going to do in response to that, being a normal person. Instead, it made him fall in love with me even more because he sees what God does through me, and that attracted him to me in the first place. It's a beautiful change, and it's a beautiful thing, and I'm telling you, 2.5 years ago now, sitting in my closet drunk, going, God, is there any way out of this? I didn't think there was, and here we are, guys, in a short amount of time that I get to be with you all, that I get to try to share the love of Christ with you, and then you're going to go out and share it with the next guy, and now we got this going on, and he even got to talk to Ethan, and it was so cute, because he has a son that's 9 years old, and Ethan and him are both only children, and so it's like they both get brothers for the first time, so it's been cute. But he got to talk to Ethan today, I want to talk to you about something, blah, 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 and he said, I want to marry your mom. Yes. And it was so cute, because if Ethan wasn't comfortable with this, we'd have a lot of things to go over, but it was beautiful how God has just taken care of it all. And, again, go back to the racquetball court where I'm crying. I got no car, I got no money, I got no job, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm going, but God, I trust you. God, I trust you. And here we are. He's got a plan, you guys, and every bit of y'all, the purpose behind the pain is something you can't even wrap your mind around right now. Why did I go through this? Why did this happen to me? What is it? Why did this scar get left? I'm telling you, it is your greatest gift. Whatever scar you got, God wants to use it to help bring people to Him. You are on the Special Forces unit now for God. You were the chosen. You were the called. You're the one He's going to use. Instead of the pastor, the preacher, the doctor, the psychiatrist, it's you, the beat up, drunk, alcoholic, and drug addict that He needs to use to try to help save someone's life and bring him to Him. We are the chosen ones for that purpose right there. Thank you guys so much for letting me share tonight with you.
Is that crazy good or what? Lee, thanks for coming out.